Meghan Markle thinks her latest venture is going to make her a billionaire, and yet she feels guilty about having money. I mean, honestly, this is really getting tiresome.
Lemonada's ad partner is Gretchen Rubin Media and would get the high end of that because of name recognition. But based on the analytics provided by Fast Company magazine this week, Meghan's made approximately $40,000 for season 1 of Confessions of a Female Founder. Not exactly Spotify money. And if she's trying to be a billionaire.
Absolutely. But why talk about feeling guilty about having money? I mean, we all know that they have it. Why are you talking about it? It's really quite gauche, isn't it?
It is, but that's not the line that I took away from it. She talked about a scarcity mindset.
The red carpet was rolled out, the cameras were ready, and the guest list was finalized. But there was one problem that nobody saw coming. One of the world's most controversial former royals was about to face the most humiliating rejection of her post-palace career. What happened next would send shockwaves across social media and expose the dangerous delusions of a woman desperately clinging to relevance she never truly earned. When Meghan Markle's visa application to attend the Miss World 2025 grand finale in Hyderabad, India was stamped with a brutal rejection. It wasn't just a bureaucratic decision. It was a declaration that sent reverberations around the globe. Indian immigration authorities didn't mince words, didn't offer alternatives, and certainly didn't care about her former royal connections. The response was swift, decisive, and absolutely devastating. This wasn't a security concern or a paperwork delay. This was a straightforward, uncompromising no that would leave Markle seething behind closed doors.
We're joined right now by Talk's royal correspondent, Rupert Bell. Very good afternoon to you, Rupert.
Good morning, Julia. I have just about recovered. I heard.
That was going to be my first question. Have you recovered? Because last time I spoke to you, we had new Meghan Sussex, not Meghan Markle. Get it right. We had her new lifestyle. I can't remember what it was called. Is it with?
We love Meg.
You know what? That's probably about my level. 5 minutes in. 5 minutes in, she'd gone and got the honey out of the bees. I was going to say bee's nest. That's a wrong thing. Beehive, and then she started making bath bombs for her guests. Because when people come and stay, she likes to have bath bombs so they can take a sip.
Sources close to the situation reveal that Markle had been making grand preparations for what she believed would be another high-profile appearance to boost her dwindling public image. Her team had already begun the familiar dance of media manipulation, carefully orchestrating what they assumed would be another carefully curated moment in the spotlight. But India's immigration system operates on facts, not fantasies, and the facts were about to deliver a reality check that would expose the hollow foundation of Markle's assumed global status.
This was opening the packet of pretzels and putting them into another bag. So that...
I've never thought of that. This is why I'm not a domestic goddess.
I think Jimmy Fallon on his programme in the States has just lampooned that particular moment. So it's definitely... one for the...
The rejection itself was clinical in its efficiency, but the implications were far more damaging than a simple denied visa. This was a public exposure of a vast gap between Markle's self-perception and the world's actual view of her relevance. For someone who has built her entire post-royal brand on the illusion of continued global importance, this bureaucratic brick wall represented something far more threatening than embarrassment. It represented the crumbling of a carefully constructed narrative that has been years in the making. But the visa denial was only the beginning of what would become a cascade of humiliating revelations that would strip away the last vestiges of Markle's imagined diplomatic immunity. The real bombshell was yet to come, and when it dropped, it would expose the audacious lengths to which Markle and her team had gone to manufacture relevance where none existed. The Miss World 2025 organizers didn't simply deny Markle's assumption of attendance, they obliterated it with surgical precision. In an official clarification that read like a diplomatic slap across the face, the organizing committee made it crystal clear that Meghan Markle was never extended a formal invitation to attend the grand finale at Hyderabad's high-tech exhibition center.
Last week, while you were ill, I managed to have a complete change of direction, so went to Cheltenham for a week and managed to avoid too much Meghan talk, but Cheltenham's now done and dusted.
Now you're back. Well, I hate to tell you.
Back.
Well, I want to talk more about Prince Harry, but just want to finish on Meghan, because
no seat had been reserved, no role had been planned, and most devastatingly of all, no interest had been expressed from the organizing committee to involve her in any capacity whatsoever. This wasn't a case of miscommunication or administrative oversight. This was a complete fabrication of involvement in an event that had never wanted her presence to begin with. The organizer's statement was as clear as it was crushing. Markle had never been on their radar, never been part of their plans, and never been welcome at their celebration of women who actually make a difference in the world.
It's not so much that the As Ever brand won't be trademarked, but she failed to sign the form, but she's actually got to explain what she's selling. She said she's selling a few lifestyle sort of products, but she's actually got to be a bit more specific. You know, the jam.
The contrast between Markle's assumed VIP status and the stark reality of her complete irrelevance to the event couldn't have been more brutal. The timing of his clarification was particularly damaging, coming at a moment when Markle's team had already begun their standard playbook of manufactured importance. The Miss World organization's swift and decisive response suggested they were not only uninterested in being associated with Markle's brand of controversy, but actively wanted to distance themselves from any suggestion of connection.
Payroll, but there we are. But this is what I don't get. She's got this massive payroll of people who she seems to go through a new person virtually every week. She doesn't seem to have anyone on the payroll who can do their job.
Well, this is it. You know, launch it, but make sure that all the ducks are in a row. And I'm not sure, you know, if she's making all this jam, where's the supplier? Where is...
For an event that celebrates women of substance and authentic achievement, the implicit message was clear. Markle's brand of hollow celebrity was not welcome. This official denial from the Miss World organizers exposed something far more damaging than a simple case of wishful thinking. It revealed a pattern of behavior that has become Markle's signature approach to public appearances: the assumption of welcome where none exists, the manufacturing of importance through suggestion rather than invitation, and the expectation that her former royal connections would open doors that her actual achievements could not.
In the country.
Yeah.
So there's a huge business behind it. Are we seeing anything but As Ever? Yes, she may want to make sell some jams, but if you're going to make a profit, you've got to sell an awful lot of jam.
Yeah, absolutely, and at a very high price. Well, I mean, look, they're trying to keep maintain.
The Miss World organization statement would prove to be just the first domino to fall in what would become a comprehensive dismantling of Markle's assumed global status. But even as the official denial was being circulated, evidence was emerging that Markle's team had already begun implementing their standard protocol for manufactured relevance, completely oblivious to the fact that their entire foundation was built on quicksand. Despite the complete absence of any official invitation or interest from the Miss World organization, Markle's machinery of manufactured importance had already kicked into high gear with devastating efficiency. Her stylist had reportedly been briefed and was already working on wardrobe selections for an appearance that existed only in the imagination of Markle's publicity team.
Well, the Heritage Foundation have been basically at the American government to try and release his immigration documents. Well, originally it said no, then they have released it, but then what they've released it is the most heavily redacted set of papers that...
The level of preparation was staggering in its presumption and embarrassing in its ultimate futility. Her PR staff had begun preparing statements and media materials for what they assumed would be another carefully orchestrated moment in the global spotlight. Press releases were being drafted, social media strategies were being developed, and the entire apparatus of Markle's public relations machine was mobilizing for an event that had never wanted her involvement. The disconnect between the reality of her situation and the assumptions of her team was so vast that it bordered on the delusional. This wasn't simply overeager preparation, this was the systematic construction of a false narrative designed to create the illusion of continued global relevance. Markle's team had become so accustomed to manufacturing her importance through suggestion and implication that they had apparently lost the ability to distinguish between actual invitations and their own wishful thinking. The result was a comprehensive preparation for an appearance that would never happen, based on an invitation that had never been extended. The irony was devastating in its completeness. While Markle's team was busy preparing for her triumphant appearance at one of the world's most prestigious beauty pageants, the actual organizers of that event were completely unaware of her existence in relation to their celebration. The contrast between the intensive preparation happening in Markle's camp and the complete absence of any corresponding recognition from the Miss World organization created a perfect storm of embarrassment that would soon explode across social media. But the preparation phase, embarrassing as it was, would pale in comparison to what happened when the carefully constructed illusion met the immovable force of bureaucratic reality. The collision between Markle's assumed importance and India's immigration requirements would create a spectacular public failure that would reverberate far beyond the immediate embarrassment of a denied visa. When news of Markle's visa denial and the subsequent revelation of her non-existent invitation hit social media, the response was immediate, brutal, and completely merciless. The hashtag not invited Meghan began trending within hours, followed quickly by hashtag India says no, as users across multiple platforms seized upon the perfect storm of presumption and rejection that Markle had created for herself. The memes came fast and hit hard, with creative users developing increasingly elaborate jokes about Markle's apparent belief that the world owed her access to events she had never been invited to attend. Twitter users crafted pointed observations about the audacity required to assume invitation to international events, while TikTok creators developed entire comedic scenarios around the concept of showing up uninvited to major global celebrations. The social media response wasn't just mockery, it was a comprehensive rejection of the entire premise that Markle's former royal status should grant her automatic access to events around the world. Users from India were particularly vocal in their support for their country's immigration authorities, framing the visa denial as a moment of national dignity that refused to bow to presumed celebrity privilege. The viral nature of the backlash exposed something that Markle and her team had apparently failed to recognize. The global appetite for her brand of manufactured controversy had reached a saturation point. Social media users weren't just laughing at this particular incident, they were expressing frustration with what they saw as a pattern of entitled behavior that assumed the world owed her continued relevance despite her lack of substantial contributions to the causes she claimed to champion. The international nature of the social media response was particularly damaging, suggesting that Markle's reputation for presumption and entitlement had transcended cultural boundaries. Users from countries across multiple continents were joining in the collective rejection of what they saw as an attempt to hijack a celebration that had nothing to do with her. The Miss World pageant represents women who have achieved meaningful impact in their communities, and the implicit contrast with Markle's record of controversy and division was not lost on observers. But the social media mockery, devastating as it was, represented only the surface level of a much deeper cultural rejection that was about to manifest in ways that would prove far more damaging to Markle's long-term reputation and global standing. The social media explosion around Markle's Miss World debacle wasn't occurring in a vacuum. It was part of a larger pattern that observant critics have been documenting for years. This incident perfectly illustrated what many had identified as Markle's signature approach to maintaining relevance: the systematic insertion of herself into major events and causes through suggestion, implication, and the careful manipulation of public perception rather than through genuine invitation or authentic involvement. The Miss World situation was textbook Markle methodology. Rather than waiting for genuine recognition or authentic opportunities to contribute to meaningful causes, her team had apparently developed a strategy of creating the appearance of involvement through careful PR management and media manipulation. This approach had worked in some previous situations, where the subjects of her attention had been either unwilling or unable to publicly contradict her implied associations. But India's immigration system and the Miss World organization represented a different category of target entirely. These were institutions with clear protocols, established procedures, and no particular interest in accommodating celebrity presumption. When faced with Markle's attempt to manufacture involvement in their event, they responded with the kind of bureaucratic clarity that left no room for interpretation or face-saving spin. The pattern recognition was becoming impossible to ignore. From award shows where she hinted at attendance that never materialized to charitable causes where her actual involvement remained suspiciously vague, Markle had been building a reputation for manufactured associations that created the illusion of continued global importance without the substance of genuine achievement or recognition. This systematic approach to relevance creation had apparently become so normalized within Markle's operation that her team had lost the ability to recognize when they were overreaching. The Miss World incident suggested that the machinery of manufactured importance had become so automatic that it was operating without any reality checking or verification of actual welcome. The result was a perfect case study in the dangers of building a public persona on assumption rather than achievement. When the carefully constructed illusion of global welcome met the reality of actual institutional standards, the collision was spectacular in its completeness and devastating in its public visibility. But this pattern of manufactured relevance was about to be exposed as part of an even larger problem that went to the heart of Markle's post-royal identity and her increasingly desperate attempts to maintain the global status she believed she deserved. The Miss World visa scandal was unfolding against the backdrop of Markle's struggling lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, which had become a symbol of the gap between her grand ambitions and her actual ability to execute meaningful business ventures. Industry insiders were reporting that the brand was facing serious challenges, with rumors circulating that she wouldn't be restocking some of her signature products, including the jam line that had become a subject of widespread mockery. The trademark issues surrounding American Riviera Orchard had exposed unearthed fundamental problems with Markle's approach to business development. Reports suggested that she had failed to properly complete necessary paperwork and had been unable to provide adequate specificity about what products she actually intended to sell under the brand. For someone positioning herself as a lifestyle entrepreneur with billionaire ambitions, these basic administrative failures represented a damaging pattern of poor execution. The jam debacle had become particularly emblematic of Markle's struggles to translate celebrity into successful business ventures. What had been positioned as a premium lifestyle product had instead become the subject of internet memes and late-night television jokes. The gap between the sophisticated brand positioning and the reality of limited production and questionable market demand had created a perfect storm of business failure wrapped in public relations disaster. The timing of the Miss World visa denial couldn't have been worse for a brand already struggling with credibility issues. While Markle was presumably hoping that a high-profile international appearance might help rehabilitate her business reputation, the spectacular failure of her attempt to secure attendance at the event instead highlighted her declining ability to command the kind of global respect that successful lifestyle brands require. The contrast between Markle's business struggles and her continued attempts to position herself as a global influencer was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Industry observers were beginning to question whether her approach to brand building was fundamentally flawed, relying too heavily on celebrity association rather than product quality and market demand. But the business failures, embarrassing as they were, represented only one dimension of a larger credibility crisis that was about to be further exposed by the international response to her Miss World presumption. The Indian response to Markle's visa application and subsequent exposure of her non-invitation status revealed something far more significant than simple immigration procedure. Voices across India, from established journalists to university students to pageant enthusiasts, had responded to the situation with a unified message that transcended the immediate circumstances of the Miss World event. The response from Indian media had been particularly pointed, with journalists explicitly rejecting what they characterized as Markle's presumption of entitlement to access their country's major events. One widely circulated observation captured the sentiment perfectly. If Meghan Markle wants a role at Miss World, she should apply like the rest of us, with merit, not entitlement. The message was clear and uncompromising. Celebrity status and former royal connections were not sufficient credentials for demanding access to events celebrating authentic achievement. The student response had been equally decisive, with young Indians using social media platforms to express their support for their country's immigration authorities and their rejection of what they saw as an attempt to use celebrity privilege to override established procedures. The generational aspect of this response was particularly significant, suggesting that younger audiences were even less impressed by Markle's attempted celebrity access than their older counterparts. Pageant fans have been especially vocal in their rejection of Markle's implied association with their celebration. For people who follow Miss World specifically because of its focus on women who have achieved meaningful impact in their communities, the contrast with Markle's record of controversy and limited substantive achievement was particularly stark. Their response had been not just rejection, but active celebration of that rejection as a victory for meritocracy over celebrity presumption. The unified nature of the Indian response suggested something more significant than reaction to a single incident. This appeared to be a comprehensive rejection of the entire premise that former royal status should grant automatic access to international events and celebrations. The message from India was clear: respect must be earned through contribution and achievement, not assumed through celebrity association. But the Indian response was about to reveal an even deeper cultural disconnect that went to the heart of Markle's fundamental misunderstanding of how the post-royal world actually operates. The Indian rejection of Markle's presumed entitlement exposed a fundamental cultural disconnect that had been building throughout her post-royal career. The assumption that countries around the world would automatically welcome her presence based on her former royal connections revealed a dangerous misreading of international attitudes towards celebrity privilege and earned respect. The cultural dimension of this disconnect was particularly significant because it highlighted Markle's apparent inability to understand that different countries have different standards for celebrity access and different tolerance levels for presumptuous behavior. India's response suggested a cultural framework that prioritizes earned achievement over inherited or associated status, creating a direct conflict with Markle's approach to global engagement. The visa denial had become a symbol of national dignity for many Indians who saw their country's immigration authorities as correctly refusing to be used as a backdrop for celebrity photo opportunities. The message was clear: India was not interested in being part of Markle's ongoing project of manufactured global relevance, particularly when that project appeared to contribute nothing meaningful to Indian society or culture. This cultural cultural rejection extended beyond the immediate circumstances of the Miss World event to encompass a broader skepticism about celebrity tourism and the assumption that famous people should be granted